I think it's the right time to call upon one of the conveners, those who believe that we have to talk about this. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the Managing Director of Graphic Communications Group, Mr. Atuafo. Round of applause for him.
The Honorable Minister of Information and Member of Parliament for Ofuase Ayebi constituency, Honorable Kojo Opon Nkrumah, the Chief Executive of Stanbic Bank, Amina Asubinin, the Chairman of the National Media Commission, the Yabuedu Ayeboafo, the Board Chairman of the Graphic Communications Group Limited, Professor Kwame Karkari, the President of the Ghana Journalists Association, Rafael Moni, our distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, our audience member networks across our digital and media partners. It is my pleasure to welcome you to another important edition for the Graphic Business Stanbic Bank Breakfast Meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic for this morning is Media and Marketing Communications Post-COVID, a catalyst for Africa's socio-economic resurgence. It is estimated that Ghana lost close to $2 billion to COVID-19. COVID has impacted our lives, social and economic wellness in Africa, and across the globe. In Ghana, according to the Finance Minister, Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta, the economy lost close to $2 billion in revenue to the pandemic due to the impact on various revenue-generating sectors of the economy from where taxes accrue to the state. The hospitality industry, for example, saw its net occupancy drop from 70% to 20% in a short space of time. The aviation industry has equally been hard hit. The media and marketing communications industry also experienced its fair share in revenue dips. And at the height of the first wave of the pandemic and during the post-lockdown period, the newspaper sales in our subsector literally dwindled, and advertising and sponsorship revenues for the industry plummeted. The print, packaging, events, and related industry and their broader ecosystem equally suffered. Each subsector will have its own litany of woes. However, some agile content creators and distributors have done a decent digital business. So it's not been all gloom. COVID has caused us to change our social life, and that has impacted in the way we communicate. Our face-to-face interactions, which was a part of our cultural setup, has been forced to be mediated by other communication channels, including near-time digital and social media channels. We have witnessed a rapid disruption in an already evolving phenomenon. And I believe that Ghana's case generally reflects the wider African situation. To help situate what the role of the media and marketing communication is and how critically important it is, I'd want to give us an indication of some of the subsectors that this broad umbrella is looking at. Film, including television and video, radio and audio, print communication, out of home, billboards and hoardings, PR, digital and interactive, integrated campaigns, brand identity and collateral design, motion graphics and digital graphic design, publication design, including print and packaging, live communications, experiential events, concerts, and also design communication. All these subsectors that come under the broader media and marketing comms umbrella have experienced some disruptions. But where do we go from here is the question, and what it is that we can do. We are of the view that the media has a clear responsibility and a mandate to restore the hope and confidence in Africa and her people, while we work to restore our economies to pre-COVID-19 levels and beyond. When you build strong brands and communicate around those strong brands, even in terms of depressed economies, they would come back bigger and stronger. And I believe the experts that we've assembled would speak further to some of these highlights that I am making. Additionally, the media has a duty to help rebuild social cohesion in an African society whose basic culture of looking out for one another through either personal visits or financial assistance has been fractured by COVID-19. The success of this duty will depend on how the media exploits its agenda-setting role. We shouldn't be focusing on what it is that we couldn't do or can't do or what somebody else is not doing, but what is it that is possible and what it is that we can do. And equally important is the role of marketing communications in helping both service and manufacturing companies regain their foothold. As we work ourselves up and develop products and services, we require creative marketing communications that is relevant, engaging, and disruptive enough to attract the attention of our audience, member networks, and taste segments who are scattered across channels. There is definitely some advantage in the disruptive effect of COVID-19. And we also believe that when the media and marketing communication subsectors get it right, it will help change attitudes around personal hygiene, including public health care and wellness, restore public and consumer confidence, restore the place of brands in our lives, enable brand marketers and companies to sell more products and services that result in higher revenues, more employment, out of which higher taxes can accrue from consistent income streams, and further restore hope to the people to ease social tension and foster cohesion on the African continent. Distinguished guests, we've assembled experts in media and marketing communications to help us find how to make the most of the African post-COVID-19 situation and turn it to our advantage. What takeouts are we potentially seeking? One, to encourage governments to work with industry to enable consistent policy and regulations that enable the media and marketing communications industries. This will drive the industry to provide the connectivity needed to sustain jobs, energize economies as we recover from the pandemic. Two, promote creativity as a business resource and maintain high levels of creativity that transcend borders. And in our instance, the marketing associations and the advertising industries led by the Chartered Institute of Marketing, CIMG, the Advertising Association of Ghana, could be at the forefront of this work. When you do great work, it transcends boundaries. We've seen over the years brands importing creative that were developed out of South Africa, out of London, out of New York. Why not us exporting work that is done here, that transcends boundaries, that is great work, that will go beyond the shores of this continent? Thirdly, make the media an attractive content partner that promotes hope and opportunity for the Africa Rising ambition that is enabled by the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, AFTA. And fourthly, converge the fragmented market players, analog and digital channels, around a strategic business partnership that are attractive to investment vehicles, and that ultimately would become scalable and of a higher salience value. I am confident that you'll find your time with us worthwhile. And once again, on this note, I welcome you all and thank you for taking time to join this program. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we can do better for the Managing Director of Graphic Communication Group.
The Honorable Minister of Information and Member of Parliament, Mr. Kojo Opong Nkrumah, the Managing Director of the Graphic Communications Group, Mr. Atuafo, the Chairman of the Board of the Graphic Communications Group, Professor Kwame Karikari, distinguished panelists, guests both here physically and virtually around the world, the media, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. The Graphic Business Stanbic Bank Breakfast Meeting has become a platform for critical deliberations on issues that border on national development. In line with our bank's purpose of driving Ghana's growth, we are proud of what this platform has become. Once again, we are here to discuss one of the most important pillars of today's society and how we can harness its power and influence to grow our country and this continent. Today's topic, media and marketing communication post-COVID, a catalyst for Africa's social economic resurgence, brings into sharp perspective the role the media and marketing communication industry could play in Ghana's economic recovery process. Evidently, the COVID-19 crisis has dealt a major blow to the world economy and plunged it into a deep economic crisis. The media and marketing industry has also suffered great disruptions, accelerated by technology and the proliferation of mobile phones. This simple and yet complex tool provides a platform for innovation, and therefore, small agile teams can access computing power and capabilities that were previously the preserve of well-funded industry giants. This has challenged the structure of the industry and society as we know it, prompting players from across the media ecosystems to adapt and to remain relevant. I can understand how these giant media houses feel, as banks are also having their fair share of disruptions caused by fintechs and Momo. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated how the spread of misinformation, amplified on social media and other digital platforms, is proven to be as much of a threat to global public health as the virus itself. However, these same tools are also amplifying the current infodemic that continues to undermine the global response and jeopardize measures to control the pandemic. The media and marketing communication industry, no doubt, is like the oil that lubricates the engine of the economy. This industry is a potent force in social, economic, and political progress, for which reason it is imperative that it presents Ghana as a brand that must be managed for growth and profitability. How will the media and marketing communication industry find novel ways to garner citizens' support to help recover from the brunt of the pandemic? How will the industry ensure that there is no disparity in the information flow process, such that all citizens are well informed to take certain required actions? To what extent should the media channel and divert efforts and attention to the more substantive agenda of helping to rebuild the economy? And then finally, how will the industry continue to lubricate the economy such that it will promote consumption, trade, commerce, and investments? In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, to the extent that many of us cannot imagine life without the media and marketing communication industry, we must face the fact that the industry cannot be ignored in any national development-oriented discussion. I am confident that the distinguished panel that we have convened this morning will put the issues in perspective and direct our thinking as we deliberate on the issues. Thank you once again for joining us this morning, and enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for that comment coming from the managing director of Stanbic Bank. They believe in the media, I believe that, and that is why all these years they've been with Graphic in putting together this program. Apologies for that earlier mix-up. And we would have a rep from the Association of Ghana, Association of Advertising, giving us an industry comment before we had the information minister setting the tone for the discussion. So, Bright Lajipo, if you are here, please let's welcome. He's a rep from the advertising industry and how they are shaping up for the new world post-COVID.
Honorable Minister, Honorable Kojompon Nkrumah, MD Stanbic Bank, Mr. Sumedin, MD Graphic, my big brother, Mr. Afo, Board Chairman, my legend, Prof. Karikari, panelists, big brother George Chumesi, Stephen Bodi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am here on behalf of the Advertising Association of Ghana to bring fraternal greetings and very warm regards to all of us, and to make a brief comment as we find very refreshing the theme that portends that media and marketing communications post-COVID actually can be a catalyst for Africa's socio-economic resurgence. We find that very assuring, considering all that our industry has gone through amidst COVID. Just 3 quick points. Today, data is regarded as very critical because we are in the age of a lot of extraction of data. So some say data is king. I like this one that says, data is the new oil. Sounds like some good money. It's going to come finally from insights. At the Advertising Association of Ghana, we've just launched a research survey to help us understand our members and reposition and rebrand our association for the future. So we've started applying ourselves to the rigor that data and analytics brings. And in the day and age we're in, there's an overabundance of data because of the availability of the technologies that we need to harvest it, process it, and drill down the insights and share it for proper use commercially. Second point is regulation. And in this case, we believe in self-regulation as a key driver of growth in our industry. I've heard someone say that the most regulated industries are those that make the most money. In this regard, we are pursuing the advertising bill that will come into effect, hopefully very soon, that will sanitize our industry and begin to unleash the potential that has always been in our industry. Finally, best practice. As we look forward to post-COVID, creating an opportunity for our industry too to make its contribution to Africa's growth and development, we believe that best practice and application of same is upon us. And we are fortunate that one of us at the moment is the global president and chairman of the International Advertising Association, Mr. Joel Nete. The International Advertising Association, IAA, positions itself as the global compact for marketing communications. And so Ghana is well positioned, as always, to drive new growth and opportunity for Africa within even the Marcom space. And we're very elated about that. In September, we would host Africa Rising 4, which is our flagship event in the IAA geared towards Africa's growth and development. And we look forward to you joining us for that event in late September. I thank you for your audience, and I look forward to an invigorating panel discussion from our rich and experienced panelists. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to invite our guest speaker for this program. Here's the Information Minister, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And thanks for the opportunity to be with you to share a few thoughts in setting the tone for our panel discussion this morning. I want to thank the organizing partners for inviting me to make these very brief remarks. I also want to in particular congratulate you for your investment in thought leadership. Platforms like this give an opportunity to have a dispassionate, evidence-based and informed discourse, which hopefully should lead to some resolution that would move our society forward. It's also interesting because very often we in the media turn the light on other segments of the economy. And today you have elected to turn the light on us for some introspection. On a lighter note, I'm told that since March last year, anytime I take the podium, all I talk about is COVID. So when you invited me and you added COVID to the theme, I was of the opinion that you want to cement my COVID credentials. I'll do my best not to announce case counts and government restrictions, but to share a few thoughts on how the African economy can recover, and in so doing, the role of the media and marketing communications. The question of what brings about economic growth and development is one that economists have been battling with for centuries now. From Adam Smith in 1776, who was theorizing about peace and justice and low taxes, through Keynes and Ricardo and Marshall, who are now introducing elements like infrastructure and natural resources, savings, availability of labor. It has been thought that there is a theory and a path which, when employed, economies can grow or recover very quickly and create prosperity for their people. But every now and then we find ourselves asking, if the theory is that simple and easy to replicate, why are there several economies that are not growing as we would imagine or are not recovering as we would imagine? It is, ladies and gentlemen, in my humble view, because the question of generating economic growth is not as simple as is imagined. In recent years, efforts have been made to focus some academic attention on the role of the media and the role of advertising in generating or in affecting economic growth and development. I think one of the first to theorize about this was the Indian economist Amartya Sen. Between 1984 and 1999, a couple of publications that Sen put out in discussion of the paper Prevention of Famine. And then since then, you have seen increasingly a lot of academic research into the real role and the impact that the media and marketing communications can make when it comes to economic growth and development. The World Bank in 2002 published what they call Right to Tell, the role of mass media in economic development. Wilbur Schramm, 2014, media's development role in social, economic, and political progress. Ladies and gentlemen, in all of these, the literature is rich and clear that without the media and marketing communications adequately playing the role of positive amplification, our full potential in economic growth and development may not be achieved. This means that even in ordinary times, if we are to fully achieve our economic growth and development potential, strong marketing communications and media support is required. And in times like this, after a pandemic, even more. Ladies and gentlemen, if there is ever a time that we need to examine the role of media and marketing communications within the context of what it takes to unleash our full economic potential, that time is now. If there's ever a time to interrogate the true impact of the work of the media and marketing communications in stimulating growth, development, and improvement in the quality of lives, that time is now. For two main reasons. First of all, it's because we are in extremely extraordinary times. There have only been fewer times in global economic history that we have had such a major economic downturn across the world, including in Africa. The IMF, for example, describes the COVID-19 pandemic as a crisis like no other. And this is partly because in response to the potentially more devastating health crisis, the measures that governments have had to take have plunged the world into an economic recession, worse than that of the Great Depression of the 1930s. Sub-Saharan African economies contracted by an unprecedented 2.4%. The global economy contracted by about 3.5% in 2020. And with poverty levels already high, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, the need to recover now and quickly is extremely high. Additionally, we are also in times of unprecedented media penetration and media impact all over the world. One thing happens in Kabul, and within seconds, you are seeing it on your television on Sunday morning in Accra. Not only has traditional media percolated all over the continent, but social media is even going faster. Social media penetration is increasingly becoming the source of news to many on our continent. It's now at 45% in North Africa, 41% in Southern Africa, 16% in West Africa in January 2021, according to the media research organization Statista. We are therefore at the intersection of an unprecedented need to engineer an economic recovery across Africa at a time when media penetration is deepest. And we cannot discount the impact that media and marketing communications can have to spur us on or to pull us back in this enterprise. And that's why I think that this conversation at this time is critical. Throughout global economic history, the world has been through some times of crisis and recovery. Recovery, the pace of recovery, and even the extent of recovery is determined by many factors, including the interaction between the efforts of government and media. The Great Depression of the 1930s had significantly negative economic impact in the Americas and in Europe. An estimated 15 million people lost their jobs in America alone. Over 20,000 bankruptcies were recorded, a failure of major banks in Europe and in America. Primarily, governments responded with major economic stimulus programs, such as the industrialization agenda of Europe and what they call the New Deal by Franklin Roosevelt in the USA. There's little literature on the role of media and marketing communications in that specific agenda, but anecdotal evidence suggests that a strong rallying of the nations around the recovery effort to get the business community and the citizenry and the general public to buy into the recovery program and to participate makes an impact in the success story. The Great Recession of 2007 to 2009 was no different, with a contraction of nearly 4% of US GDP in Q4 2008, slowdown of global growth by about 5% in 2007, and losses of about $1.5 trillion, the collapse of banks and credit markets. There was a need for strong multilateral government intervention to engineer recovery. Now, while the media played a critical role in examining the recovery efforts, the propriety of the recovery efforts, it also provided deep enlightenment on the efforts at removing the systemic risks in the financial system. In particular, the literature shows a quick pickup in consumer confidence with firmer confidence in the housing markets by 2009, aided by strong marketing communications on the path to recovery. Even the international debt crisis of 1982 to 1989 was similar. It is argued that the recklessness of creditors, mismanagement of debtors on the global stage culminated in that crisis. It was repeated in Mexico, in Asia, Brazil, Argentina between 1999 and 2002. But in all of this, a clear exercise to carry the people along, supported by a robust media and marketing communications ecosystem, aided the journey. Ladies and gentlemen, the media, through all of these examples that I've given, has played two significant roles. One, influencing, and two, reflecting. And here I want to quote some of the texts that literature provides on exactly what the media has done in these enterprises. I want to quote first from Karma, Asia Pacific 2008. It says, the fact is that the media can create societal and market opinions. The media can influence a financial crisis either by provoking and sustaining a longer economic recovery, because media has a tendency to produce the stories to that effect, or by initiating recovery through the distribution of positive images, thereby stimulating and encouraging government action to solve problems. The media employs output of economic organizations, governments, companies, etc. in their coverage. How we report the aims, the strategies, the evaluation, the outcomes, they can fuel or they can distort the picture of and for the general public. And in return, it can become the new stimulus of how the economic actors, the general public, and even governments further act in this recovery cycle. For any set of interventions to be successful, it has been observed, it must gain the goodwill and the support of the people. And the key value drivers, such as business and citizens, will only support these recovery policies if they understand it, and understand it especially through credible media. This means policymakers must adopt broad-based, proactive, robust, nuanced, and repetitive marketing communication strategies to get everybody on board these recovery programs. But it also means that media must reflect these realities to the people and complement these efforts by helping the effort to rebuild genuinely, highlighting the shared responsibilities in rebuilding and the common benefits when we successfully rebuild. This is what the history of recoveries tell us, and the theory, I dare say, will not change. The COVID-19 pandemic has no doubt brought twin crises to the world. First, the health crisis, which threatens lives, and second, the economic crisis, which threatens livelihoods. I recall from the very first night when we recorded our cases here in Ghana. Throughout the journey that we have traveled in containing the health crisis, I believe Ghana has done fairly well. But this has been based on two major things. One, the strong health-based interventions anchored on testing, tracing, and treating. And two, the support of media and marketing relations. It is clear that when the media stepped up to the plate and played their positive role in influencing the behavior of society, when the media focused heavily on reporting facts, heavily on getting properly accredited experts to do the analysis of the facts, heavily on amplifying the robust marketing communications efforts from government and health practitioners, the evidence is that together we have made laudable gains in this fight. And this is exactly what we'll need in the second crisis, the economic crisis. Like has always been done, governments, like in Ghana and across Africa, will roll out their intervention programs. But once again, we will need strong marketing communications and media complement to succeed. The state efforts include vaccination in the midst of a global vaccine supply chain shortage. It includes opening up the economy as much as possible for resumption of normal economic activity, albeit with the challenges of a good number of people who are not complying with the preventive etiquette. It includes improving domestic resource mobilization to enhance our ability to invest in healthcare infrastructure and economic avenues at a time when people are feeling the economic pinch. It sounds like a contradiction. It also includes investing heavily in initiatives that will yield high, quick growth for the many and not the few. It includes balancing the opportunity to trade across Africa with the need to mitigate the risk of cross-country COVID infections. Ladies and gentlemen, these efforts are not easy, and government will not even pretend that they are easy. In a robust media and democratic culture like ours, you have to convince the citizen who will not protect himself and who could die if you don't vaccinate him, yet who is hardly holding you to account to all the laws, that you have to do whatever is necessary to get him vaccines. And you need the help of the media to succeed at that. You have to convince the very person who refuses to wear masks that the economy needs to be reopened so he doesn't go hungry, and that you cannot even lock up everybody who does not wear a mask. And you need the help of the media and marketing communications to succeed at that. You have to convince the 33,000 engineers, lawyers, accountants, and other professionals who are not paying tax, according to the Ghana Revenue Authority, yet are asking for everything to be fixed, that they have to pay their due if we are to rake in the 10% of GDP and lower our borrowing. And you need the help of the marketing communications professionals and the media to succeed at that. You have to convince a Ghanaian businessman who is looking forward to tapping into the Africa continental free trade opportunities that we have to explore Zoom calls and other non-personal trade mechanisms because we just cannot do business as usual. These efforts are not easy. Two things, ladies and gentlemen, that I'd like to draw your attention to that we need to attend to at this time are, one, the need to reverse the tendency for public policymakers to assume that these things are obvious and the media and the public and everybody must know them. It's not true. We must consistently engage in strong marketing communications and get the support of the media to get total understanding of these things. We must also deal with the second issue of the tendency of some of our colleagues in the practice to think that our only job is to be a check on government and to highlight the ills of the private sector. Policymakers must understand that now more than ever, there's a need to communicate, and to communicate if we are to carry everybody along. Our colleagues in the media must also understand that we are in this boat together. And part of our job is to positively influence the society to support the recovery effort. At a time when the media landscape has been significantly, negatively impacted and somewhat changed because of COVID, revenues have dwindled and competition has increased with technology disruptions to traditional media. One of the consequences is that public interest media has been one of the biggest victims and needs to be attended to. Attention must be given to support the media recognize and play the very important role that they have to play in the recovery effort. Attention must be given to aid the media understand and convey to the public the peculiar difficulties of today and the genuine efforts that all must make if we are to recover. Attention needs to be given to support the media to adequately balance the obligation of reflecting and positively influencing society. The media throughout economic history has been integral in the recovery process. Isa, for example, writes that the media creates two types of behavior in society: approach and avoidance. Approach behavior is when the media provides positive, explicit judgments about an economic situation or crisis, which may influence people to become more confident and positive about the economy. Such positive news may, for example, encourage the unemployed to seek employment, or businesses to expand their operations, or people to go into entrepreneurship, urge the private sector to take advantage of interventions that drive growth. On the other hand, the media can also engineer avoidance behavior, and that consists of media providing negative, explicit judgment about an economic situation or crisis. Negative, explicit judgment pertaining to high unemployment or the instability of financial markets, for example, may provoke a climate of fear and apprehension, deterring people from seeking employment or investing in financial markets. When we instill fear and negativity as our primary content, the consumer confidence required to aid our collective recovery and the advertising revenues that make us survive as businesses are challenged. Such negative publicity arises partly due to the unhealthy competition between media outlets. To beat the competition, some outlets select stories to play on the emotions of the consuming public, which could potentially interfere with attempts to rally all us up and rise together. It is therefore part of the role of the media to eschew all forms of misleading publications, particularly about the economy and about the private sector, because it deters investors, both foreign and local. It deters the ability of the general public to participate in the economic recovery effort, and it will lead to the dwindling of our industry revenues as well. Now is the good time to show up strong marketing communications, not just by government and policymakers, as I mentioned earlier, but also by the private sector. It's true that in times of economic crisis, one of the first budgets to be cut is the advertising budget. The effect is weakened media that may be prone to undesired journalism. But the literature is true that now is the time for private sector to shore up advertising and marketing communication efforts. Because not only would it help the general economic recovery, it will help your business recover faster. As far back as 1927, advertising executive Roland Vail published a report in the Harvard Business Review detailing his study of companies during the 1923 recession. And let me share just a few parts of it with you. They found, for example, that companies who continued to advertise came out 20% ahead of where they were pre-recession, while those who reduced advertising ended up 7% below their pre-recession levels. So, to the major brands out there, the theory is counterproductive, that these are the times, rather, that you should show up your advertising and marketing communications. And I believe that our colleagues in the media will applaud you if you do that for them. McGraw-Hill's study of brands during the US recession of the early 1980s also revealed that out of about 600 businesses analyzed, those who continued to advertise during the 1980 to 82 recession were about 256% ahead of their competition that chose not to advertise. So while we encourage brands to rather step up their advertising spend, we also further encourage the marketing communications industry that now is the time that you have to invest in innovative ways of delivering messages on behalf of your brands, innovative ways of creating value for your brand clients. The same old campaigns and concepts may not cut it. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the most critical time in recent economic history on our continent, a time to rally round the flag and indeed rally round the continent-wide effort to recover. This requires common purpose from policymakers, private sector players, and the media. It is the only way to guarantee our common success. On the part of government, we will continue to provide support for the industry through fair regulation, capacity enhancement programs, and support to the general economy, which will in turn help the media and marketing communications industry. Help us to help you to help the nation in the end. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Information Minister Kojo Oppong Nkrumah. I think we can do better than that. A showing appreciation to him and all the salient issues that he's spoken about in terms of our role in the recovery process of the economy, revenue as well, and what would media be like post-COVID. And I believe that he has actually touched on the most important points, just like what I remember as at Virgin Nigeria, they had a tagline that said that touching the right spot. And I believe that he has really touched on the right spot. We'll now move into the main discussions. And before I move on to do that, I also like to remind everyone here that this program is live on Joy 99.7 FM, also on Joy News channel on Multi-TV. And also, I see the nation's biggest GTV also here covering this event for us. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this program is also live on our various social media handles and also on the Graphic Plus News Plus, and today's edition of Graphic Understand is on the Graphic News Plus app as well. And this is the graphic business Stanbic Bank breakfast meeting as we look at the media's role will be in communications post-COVID-19, a catalyst for Africa's socio-economic resurgence. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we now want to move into the main discussion, and I'll be calling on my panelists who will join me up stage here. George Chumesi is the CEO of ABN Holdings Limited. Let's welcome Mr. George Chumesi. He is with ABN Holdings. Also, I'd like to call on Stephen Bwedi. He's lead enabler, digital marketing and communications expert. Let's show him some love, please. And I'll save the senior for the last. He is Professor Kwame Kakari, Executive Director of the Media Foundation, West African, board chairman of Graphic Communications Group Limited. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for us to move into our main discussions. And as I have these distinguished personalities here, my name is George Afi. I'll be your moderator for this session as we look at media and marketing communications post-COVID, a catalyst for Africa's socio-economic resurgence. Let me first start with Dean before I move to others outside us. So, Prof. Kwame Kakari, I first want to get your thoughts in terms of, even during COVID, how you want to assess the media in terms of what we have done, what we are doing, and what we should be doing, Prof.
Thank you very much. Overall, I think that the Ghanaian media, by and large, have performed quite well. My observation of the Ghanaian media is that whenever there is a major national crisis, they really, by and large, stand up to support government and the whole society in moving forward. I can talk specifically about the organization that I am chairman of. Graphic, for instance, did some very good job in terms of giving information that is reliable and also raising issues that I think would help government and key agencies to be alert and help with their policies and programs. However, there is one area that in all of this conversation we have tended to gloss over or not even be conscious of. We are all aware that during the pandemic, a lot of fake news, a lot of false information, a lot of misleading material were being peddled left and right on social media, in some mainstream media, and so on. But I think the biggest weakness of the media has been in the area of helping to overcome superstition, not only in relation to the pandemic, but in general terms, in relation to everything. We are talking about the recovery of this continent from all these doldrums into, a brighter future. But we do very well in looking at the larger picture, the bigger picture, and so on. But some of the fundamental things that set us back, such as superstition, false beliefs, false consciousness, and so on, not only the media, but the larger society tend not to address these. Yeah. Last week, a young woman I know who lives in our neighborhood came to my house and told me that she works in an organization where there are 100 people, and the management of the organization was asking them to go and vaccinate. And yet, as she told me, most of the people in that organization, young people generally and so on, did not want to go. Why? Because the false information there is that if you are a woman and you vaccinate, you'll become infertile. You will not be able to have a child. I mean, this kind of superstitious belief is widespread. And how do the media tackle this? Remember when the pandemic broke out, one of the statements, one of the sentences in President Akufo-Addo's very first broadcast was that we must approach this from a scientific perspective. In other words, what I'm aiming at is how do our media help develop a scientific culture, a culture of a scientific approach to whatever we are dealing with in society. So the media have done very well. They do well in generally addressing the topics and the issues. But this underbelly of African society, where superstition is so rife and it's almost every day being reinforced by all manner of quack sources, I don't think the media do very well, nor even our educational systems do very well in addressing this problem of superstition.
Well, just a quick follow-up, Ben. What should be our role, or how should we strategize in terms of trying to ensure that we still become the main authority when it comes to dissemination of information? Because today, some of us, in terms of breaking news, didn't get it from the traditional media. We woke up, get that information from our WhatsApp groups, and all sort of new media. How do we try and position ourselves in trying to still be relevant in this space so that we don't become an alternative rather than the main factor when it comes to this information?
The question is very critical, and there's no one way around it, especially in an environment of multiplicity, pluralism. And in an environment of multiplicity, we must admit and even encourage variation, varieties of viewpoints and so on and so forth. But in the midst of all of the variety and multiplicity and contrast and so on, there ought always to be a basic, a core value system that all media, whatever political, ideological persuasion you have to focus on, such as the pandemic, such as economic development. You may belong to a school of thought this way or that way, but there ought to be some fundamental things that unite all of us and around which all media agree, even to disagree in moving forward in unison. We're talking about social cohesion and so on. And there are, in the midst of the pandemic, at the same time that we are trying to come out of the pandemic, there are so many other challenges. Take terrorism, for instance, which is a big problem in our sub-region and around most of Africa. No media should take a position that is contrary to helping peace, stability, and so on, no matter what your ideological, political, partisan perspective is. So I think at the end of the day, and I think I heard a hint in Honorable Minister's speech, Kojo Opon's presentation, brilliant presentation now, about the public service, public interest, public service journalism, one thing, and also institutionally, public service media. I think in the midst of this, in the midst of commercial media and so on, it is one institutional media form that we must try and work hard to support, build, and help give a better direction to, because that might be the area that would be obliged to perform certain roles that we may not expect, for instance, commercial media to do. Our commercial media And the biggest ones among them do very well with public service journalism in this country. For instance, you have private media that are broadcasting live certain things going on in Parliament, certain things going on by the executive, and so on and so forth, the judiciary. And it's all fine, but we need to help focus on building, strengthening, and giving support to institutionally public service media in our environment. And I think they stand in a stronger obligatory situation to respond to the important question you are raising.
Let me get to Mr. Boedi as well, as we still stay within more of an expert when it comes to digital marketing. And as you look at post-COVID, how are things going to change for the media, and how should things change for the media? Is there a way out for the media when it comes to marketing communications post-COVID, or we're caught up between the hard rock and deep blue sea?
Thank you very much for inviting me, everyone, and thank you, George, for the question. Can I just say a bit in addition to what Prof said before?
Go ahead,
I think one of the things Prof said, which is very true, is that mainstream media in particular did very well in communicating and educating and informing us as a public during the COVID, which was good, at the risk sometimes of even losing revenues. I know some stations canceled programs just to broadcast COVID-related. The challenge we had, which Prof hinted at, is where we have, because these days in the digital world, everybody's a publisher, it's easy to put out content readily. So you have people publishing all sorts of, junk content that then kind of disrupted what was going on, and there was so much confusion at them. You asked about the role of mainstream media in this. I think one of the things we need to do is mainstream media needs to insist on adherence to the ethics of the profession. Now, the trend is that, yes, people are turning to social media to find out news, to discover brands and all of that. But we would always go back to traditional media to validate what we see offline. And we need to project that a bit more. Hope you understand what I mean. So that needs to be strengthened. And then we also need to somehow embrace people, all these bloggers, who are only after traffic to make money. We need to embrace them and help lift them out of that corner where they are, where their focus is mainly to break news and sensationalize things, because they focused on some prophet somewhere saying that he's going to cure for COVID. COVID is not real. Those were the kind of news that they published, but they got their traffic. So that's the challenge. If I can come back to your question, I think the role of the media, as in what lies ahead for the media, is very positive. Since the outbreak of COVID, we've seen great strides in the penetration of digital, for example. So you've seen more people go online. Honorable Minister mentioned, for example, that 16% of West Africans are online. In fact, in Ghana, are on social media. In fact, in Ghana, it's 28% now. So we are even ahead of a lot of markets here. During COVID, we found people, a lot of content were created and were purposed for online, for example. So the opportunities are widely there. They've always been there. But because of the higher penetration now, we now have more opportunities to make more impact. If it comes to revenue, there are even new ad forms that have developed now. And we as a media need to stop looking, for example, at just ad spaces, selling ad spaces, but talking to the data, talking to what's going on in digital and using that to target people, because businesses are looking for new opportunities to tell their story, to market their products. And media as a channel needs to grow, follow this development, the growth of AI, automation, artificial intelligence, all those things, need to follow that in developing new channels for businesses to grow and tell their story and market their product.
So, you talked about people coming back to the traditional media for verifying information.
Yes.
In an era where it's all about the trending, and for the likes of maybe, let's say, Stanbic will want to look at what people are talking about, how they feed into that space. How do we address that problem where
I think
businesses will want to look at what is the most topical issues that people are talking about,
and they want to run off the back of that.
Play in that.
Yeah, I think this is why a platform like this is very, very important. We need to do more thought leadership, where we begin to educate even the businesses that are chasing the numbers. That's not always about the numbers. Sometimes the facts have to come before the breaking news. That is very, very important. And Those who will survive, the businesses that will survive and win, as in the media, will be the ones that stick to the facts. Because the fake news and those who chase just the numbers will always be found out. If I can give an example, one of your colleagues invited me to speak the day that we had Oswald, that breaking news. It was great. We saw a lot of brands tagging along. But what were condom companies and other things doing there? You understand what I mean? It has no relevance at all, but they're just using the numbers. I often ask the question, what next after trending? And in my business, what I do, sometimes you have to put the money aside and educate brands that this is the right way to do things. I may not be making money today, and you may not see the spike in numbers that you want, but tomorrow you'll be the winner, because you need to establish yourself as a thought leader, as a leader in that market, and then everything else will follow.
In the corporate world, they'll talk about, it's all about the bottom line. How do we draw the line between the bottom line in the media space and also responsible media and all those things? Should the same principle be applied to the media, even post-COVID, about it being about the bottom line?
I'd like to thank the Honorable Minister, my friend Atwafo, and the Stanbic MD for the opportunity to speak here. I'd like to see the glass as half full. Actually, from where I'm sitting, COVID is a fantastic opportunity in the sense of resetting the media agenda in Africa, and I'll explain why. Between 1960 right through to the 80s, our media infrastructure was driven by military rule in the main and one-party states. And then in 1996, due to the PRSP by the World Bank, we began the process of liberalizing the media environment. Very quickly, come 2021, a few good years later, the fundamental thing which will make media and entertainment successful within the context of the analog regime is advertising revenues. All throughout this period, Africa has had a heavily discounted advertising regime, primarily due to the absence of diaries at a very basic level, but audience research. In comparison, for example, the British Advertising Audience Research Board. So what COVID has done is it's made everybody aware of the reality of a new digital ecosystem. Within the context of business, I'd like to quote or refer to PwC, who continually, since I think 2015, have been producing their Media Entertainment Outlook report. And I'd like to refer to their 2024 report, which is global. So globally, this report says that in 2020, the entertainment and media industry absorbed the historic shock of COVID-19, which toppled long-standing business models, amplified existing trends, and forged new opportunities. As the global economy shrinks for the first time since 2009, the 2.1 trillion industry is forecast to contract in 2020 by 5.6%. From the point of view of Africa, last year, the global cake was 600 billion, i.e. advertising. Africa's take of that cake was 1%. That 1% had about 50% in South Africa, and then in Egypt, and then in Nigeria, not Nigeria, actually Kenya, right? And then Nigeria. When you look at our demographics, you've got Nigeria as our biggest population, and then Ethiopia as our second largest. There's no advertising in Ethiopia. So from the point of view of the industry, 2021 is like 1921 for me, right, in terms of evolution and development. The second point I'd like to raise is that we need to revisit this concept of the half-glass syndrome from a structural capital perspective, from a political capital perspective, from a relational capital perspective, and a financial capital perspective. Political capital. When you look at Reporters Without Borders reports, reporting over the past, I think, 5 years, Ghana has consistently been number one. Currently, I think Ghana is number 3 in comparison to Namibia and Cape Verde. Those two countries have a population of about 2.5 million. We have 30 million, which means that Ghana technically is number 1. Based on, I think, the repeal in July 2001 of the criminal libel law, the media exploded, right? I say this very carefully. In every media environment where advertising is suppressed, you will get brown bag journalism. It's a fact, right? And what that means is that journalists do not have money to do their job effectively in terms of the fourth estate, in terms of the critical issue around investigative authentication of the democratic process and solutions-based journalism, which affects development in our kind of environment in Africa. So from the point of view of Africa, I know the continent quite well. Ghana is well placed to become the digital hub of the continent. In that regard, there are a number of challenges which apply across Africa, but specifically, maybe the Ghana scenario. I don't know the Ghana scenario typically very well, but I do know enough to make some assumptions. One, there are falling advertising revenues. That you've alluded to, Ato. But it's a moot point because everyone who works in advertising will tell you that it's a buyer's market, not a seller's market, right? There's very little effort on the part of those who own media to give the advertiser what they want. So most of the money goes to billboards. And then the telcos came along and they've got programmatics, they've got algorithms, they've got the tools which pinpoint lifestyle, is it LSMs, right? Which advertisers want. So fundamentally, the industry's moved on. So print is dead. Analog broadcasting is dead. Everything that's happening is like our railway industries after colonization. It's like our airline industry. It's only a matter of time. But we have the opportunity to reset. And when that reset happens, the issue of sustainability, which is many people in support media call existentialist crisis, yeah? The global north, all those in that kind of support services. Like, I think typically there's the Media Foundation for West Africa, which does a lot of work with the American group CIMA and others. Let me not go into that detail. But a reality that has been made worse is that the global north is controlling our media. Facebook is the largest publisher of media right now. So when it comes to any type of news, in Ghana, Facebook reports that first, and then Twitter follows. And then the traditional print media will follow. And look at the models in the US. New York Times had to change quickly to digital to retain profitability. Most of the media, including Washington Post, had to be absorbed by Amazon. So when you look at what's happening in the global north, what's happening here is very existentialist. It's going to get worse. Prof mentioned disinformation. It's a threat which we've all seen, January 6th. It's not new. What happened in the US should tell us that the thing that happened in Tunisia, right? Yeah, it's fundamentally just the beginning. But I don't think it'll affect Ghana because we do, with all our problems, have the best media environment and the best democracy of the continent. So we have an opportunity to lead the continent. I won't go into the big detail of governance and all of that, but one point which I'd like to make is that new internet societies are forming. Those are controlled by FANG being Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. In the West, the global north. In Asia Pacific, it's Alibaba, WeChat, and Jio, Reliance Group from India. Yet, fundamentally, our ecosystem in Africa, according to Google and IFC, will be $180 billion by 2025, and in 2050, 712 billion. We have a huge opportunity to reset, make the digital economy a very powerful income generator for the nation, and to drive the agenda of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I'll end here.
I'll come to you, Mr. But Mr. Chimes, don't you think that some of these things are just passing and temporary? There was talk about when at the height of COVID, work from home. In US, banks are now giving their employees timelines to get back to the office vaccinated. Disneyland was shut down in US. They are back. People are going because they're vaccinated. this thing about is doom and gloom for some sectors of the economy isn't just a temporary thing that when we get over this, when everyone is vaccinated, had immunity, things will pick up. Today, people are being asked to get back to the office.
The Honorable Minister mentioned the New Deal, Roosevelt's New Deal, yeah? So you've got to look at things from, it depends on how you think, right? I think it's a huge opportunity. The reality is that this is not new. 1919 to 1921, maybe 200 million people died, unfortunately, from the flu, right, alone. I mean, there's no kind of like data to verify that. But these pandemics have happened before. And in our instance, malaria is a greater pandemic than COVID. I mean, let's face it, it's not great, but before this happened, the world didn't care about us, right? And people were dying according to World Health statistics, World Health Organization statistics. So the reality is that you can look at the gloom or you can look at the boom. I choose to look at the boom. And the boom is that if we get our act right, this country will be the digital leader of Africa.
Mr. Bodie, let me come to you quickly, and I'll come to Prof as well. In terms of traditional media, is it dead for us, or there is still an opportunity for us in terms of how we craft the marketing communication and how we support the resurgence and the recovery process as well?
That's something I wanted to come back on. George said that it was dead. I like to think that it's dying, and there's opportunity for it to see a resurgence. And I often say, I think, just to give some hope to my friend Ato and the others, it's how you integrate digital in traditional that's most important. I mean, elsewhere in the States, in UK and other places, we've heard of OPEDs and stuff. Yes, I was talking to somebody. A legend like Prof. Kakari should be writing content to be published or even to be on radio or even in print. That will give people reason to continue to patronize print and radio. It's the value you give people in the traditional. If we refuse to grow and we don't adapt how we treat traditional, that would happen to us. The same way in your business. I was saying it this morning. Nobody ever goes back to, would ever even go back to watch this event from the first second to the end of it. You need to do what we call slice and dice. So you package it for the online audience. If you don't think that way, and you think that people will just come to, it won't work. So traditional media needs to think of how they embrace digital. What happened at New York Times, it's embracing digital so that now there's more value being offered to consumers. And that doesn't kill traditional. I think that's something you hear around. People are scared to embrace digital because they think it will kill traditional media. No, it won't.
Tell us more why it wouldn't.
It wouldn't, because it depends on how much content they're giving people value. I'll give an example. I know in this market, some businesses, media houses, have tried to even adopt a subscription model and push it out. I say we are not ready yet because we haven't educated the market enough about how it works. And number two, we haven't given people enough content, enough reason to embrace that. Ato's company tried using QR codes, for example, to give people more content. The reason why it failed is that we were not educated, as in the public wasn't educated on how this works. News breaks in the morning, it's in print. Within 30 minutes or even 5 seconds, the news is developing. You embrace QR codes and other tools to be able to give people the updates. You understand what I'm saying? In the same way, in your station, you have the main broadcast news bulletins, the morning, 6 o'clock, 12, and maybe news night. People like to access content on demand. So if you think about them, that content that they won't be able to access when it's in traditional, and you package it for online, then they'll go and access it when they have the time to access it. This is how the two work together. Plus, create content that's exclusive to both platforms. So, yes, traditional print will exist and online will exist, but give people reason to patronize both, so they know the value they are getting from online and not getting from traditional. I hope that makes sense.
I asked the other speaker earlier on about the bottom line argument and also about responsible media and all that. At the end of the day, we're looking at how can we ensure that we pay the bills, we pay the workers, but also keep up to the responsible media stuff that everybody is looking up to? How do we deal with that challenge?
There are a number of ways. One of them I would have directed at the Honorable Minister since he's here. We need to invest more and enable the private media to even be able to do more because they are partners. Let's face it. GBC alone can't do everything that you expect the media to do. And so you need to invest even in capacity building and things like that. That's a way that you kind of support and enable private media to be doing. Because otherwise, with private media, it comes down to the bottom line. And if you're not making money, you're not there as a charity. Private media doesn't exist as a charity. So unless you give them enough reason to do a lot of the public, service media journalism, which Prof talked about, it won't happen. But we need to support them, support in terms of even giving them the right infrastructure. I know, for example, some of your reporters report from remote. One way is to equip the NCA, for example, to enable them to have even better connectivity, or even be able to, so that they can be able to broadcast, send news articles from remote and things like that. If you go to stadiums, for example, if you want football to be reported and you want to grow the football, why can't the government set up a media center so that those who go to the stadium and want to send their reports can work from there? They have better infrastructure and everything to be able to send. That's a way of equipping private sector to
But
be able
just
to
a
do
quick
that.
follow-up. Kojo, the Minister of Information, spoke about how the media budget is being cut, not only in the public space, but even the private sector as well.
Yes.
And most companies are merging departments. They are cutting down the marketing budget, even the personnel. At a time when there's no free money anywhere, every company wants to ensure that if I spend a peswa, this is the return. The era of developmental journalism, and I'll come back to Prof to help me out, is it facing one of its biggest threats post-COVID? Because when I, as an expender, if I advance X amount of money to AAG or the advertising companies and all the rest, I'm going to look at the impact on the bottom line. The era where we were pushing developmental journalism and all the rest, isn't it under threat now?
It is, face the challenge. But again, what I'll say is that sometimes we, the media, don't sell enough, we don't offer enough value to private sector, which can support some of these. So, for example, this platform is a thought leadership platform. Ultimately, it positions Stanbic and Graphic as leaders when it comes to business conversations in this market. Okay. And we did it for how many years? Is it 11 or 7 years? I had a number sometime this morning. So that's one way. In the same way, some of the, developmental journalism that's being done, it's about communicating the value to private sector where some of the money exists to be able to ride along. It's not always about selling their ads. I do a lot. We need to even rethink CSR in this market so that even thought leadership is part of CSR. It's not always about going to build school buildings elsewhere and all those things, which are the ones that people see easily. No, this is part of it.
Prof, as a champion of ethics and sticking to the professional standards and developmental journalism, post-COVID or in this era of COVID, do you think that those principles and ideals are under big challenge?
Well, there are always challenges to professional standards, ethical behavior, and all the time. Of course, pandemics create their own environment and their own conditions that might offer opportunities for misbehavior, even among all manner of professionals, whether it's doctors, this and that. But let me come back to the theme that we were discussing before you posed this question, concerning the bottom line, media, and their relevance. Again, a lot of time when we talk, we are talking about the bigger elements. We are talking about resurgence, economic recovery, and so on and so forth. And so when we talk about the bottom line, let us relate it to the many radio stations that are in the district capitals, in the rural areas of our country, and through whom I suspect Mr. Ayeboafu may correct me, many or most of our rural dwellers are listening to. many of them are catching hell. I do know a number of community radio stations that almost closed down simply for the inability to pay electricity bills. We talk about supporting these media. I mean, I'm not a member of government, but we all ought to always appreciate that we have governments in an economy that are very limited. So what can government do? What must government do? Somebody had a brilliant idea of a media development fund or a media something fund. Of course, like so many other things in the public realm, it got bastardized, got abused, and nothing came out of it. But I suspect that even for government to be relieved of every day being bombarded to help media, something like that might need to be established as a way of shoring up the media. In my mind, I'm not talking about handouts. A media loan fund that is very accessible with a very competitive interest rate might be worth it, because the digitalization of media, we just heard about the statistic that in West Africa penetration is 16%. For various reasons, the mass of our people are not going to readily be on the digital platforms for some time to come. We must accept that, and therefore, I like the idea of how do you marry, for want of a better word, the digital development and then the sustenance of traditional media, so that our rural people, where the economy really is coming from, will also be part of all of the conversations for resurgence, for economic development, and so on and so forth. If we ignore where the majority are in helping to build up the media there, in helping to build the capacity of the media there. For instance, you drive around this country and radio stations in the rural areas are imitating the big stations in Accra, whereby from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., people are doing breakfast show. What is the content of 4 hours of radio program? Whereas, a certain re-engineering might make those radio stations more usable, more profitable for the audiences there. In other words, the bottom line we are talking about with media, what can we do to support the larger media terrain outside of Accra, Kumasi, and so on, where the rural people are also listening to? Somebody said GBC cannot do it alone. Certainly, GBC cannot and must not be asked to do it alone in a new environment of multiplicity and pluralism, which means all the different sectors need to be supported. Even the larger private media who are now doing television, they have severe difficulties of sustaining their economies. How do we address all of this? How do we also address the movement onto the digital platforms? How do we help bloggers or blogging so that they will be more relevant and may minimize the tendency to producing fake news and so on? These are all serious questions that ought to be part of the ongoing conversation. At the end of the day, the advertising community, they also thrive on an economy that is thriving. If the economy is slow, advertisers, yes, they may withdraw here and there and so on, but we do know that advertising depends on industry that is growing. In an economy like this, yes, they may revert to billboards and all of that, but at the end of the day, we must, that's why the discussion about a resurgence is so important for everybody. Because the advertisers can go down if the economy basically is not thriving very well. Advertising depends on consumers. And again, the banking sector and financial banking education. What can we demand the banks to do? Stanbic, Malco, and the CEO here, and you all. What can you help the media to do in terms of educating the public on financial and banking sense, a better sense? So that, for instance, we can't kill it all, but there will be a minimal attraction to the pyrams and all of these schemes that have brought untold hardships to individuals and families. So what initiative can Stanbic and Graphic, for instance, take? You see, because people make wrong investments. Because they lack a certain kind of education, but of course also because we all want money and we want it now. So in these conversations, there seems to be some global obligation on everybody and every sector, and the media becomes the pivot, the center, the core of perhaps helping all of these sectors to do what we might all benefit from. So again, I'm thinking aloud. I don't have any real answers to these complex questions.
Prof, it's great to think a lot. That's why we had the information minister here. We also had the Stanbic Bank MD here. It says that when you talk to God, you talk to the air, right? There are gods in the space that you're talking about. This is the Graphic Business Stanbic breakfast meeting as you look at marketing communication, post-COVID, the role of the media in terms of socio-economic resurgence. And we'll be bringing in the audience to join us in this discussion. This program is live on Joy 99.7 FM, the Joy News channel on Multi TV, and also DTV as well. And I'll be bringing the audience soon in terms of contributions, questions. I've seen advertisers here, I've seen content developers here, I've seen media owners here as well. What do they have to say when it comes to the new media quotes as in post-COVID? Or some are saying that COVID will still be with us, it's not going anywhere. How should we strategize to survive in this market? Mr. Bwedi, there's the bit about the marketing communication bit that one would ask that what should change to survive the market? What should change to compel the likes of Stanbic to put aside a large chunk of their monies to communicate to the public? And also, what should change from those who act as the medium to convince the public that, yes, I have to listen to this communication coming out?
We need to embrace more of the new formats, for example. So these days, you've heard of programmatic and other words that are bandied around. Even location-based marketing, for example. It might be old, but it's still very relevant in these days. And also some of the old tools. Prof mentioned something about financial education. And let me say this, maybe it's as a tip for Stanbic. In this market, when we mention bloggers, what comes to mind is entertainment and people just snitching on others. But blogging is an area where industry hasn't really explored, okay? If you ask me why Stanbic is my bank, you ask me why I'll go to the website or go to the app. Is it to check my balance or to check the basic stuff? But there's no place where people go for financial education. For example, somebody has finished school, they want to buy a car the next year. Where do they go for tips on planning to buy a car and things like that? We need a home elsewhere in other markets. There are blogs that drive such education. And this is an area that they can do so they can partner with you, for example, as a radio station, where this content that's created and sitting on the blog is then distributed. Again, this is a lot being said here, great content, but how do we package the content for post-event access and consumption? Because we know a lot of people access content on demand. This is content that will fit your YouTube channel, for example. So you have your own TV station where these are done, and you drive traffic to it. So these are various ways that you can do them. So also one of the things is that today, there's a lot of data available. So you should make data-driven decisions about every dollar that you spend in your marketing. Okay. In the olden days, like George said, when you get your MNC, when I was working in corporate, you get your MNC, you know how many billboards you want to put out. You know how many TVs, you want to shoot a TVC or whatever. Great. My friend will tell you we did a lot in that industry. But the reality is that these days you need to start talking more about the numbers, the data, the analytics and things like that, to be able to go back to your board to defend the marketing budget that you are setting up. And if you're not doing that, you won't be able to progress. There are three words I often mention: monitor, measure, and optimize performance. Monitor, measure, and optimize performance. Today, you can even monitor and measure performance in real time. When I used to work in corporate, I send out an email. Within 5 minutes, I can tell who has received the email, how many have bounced. This is many years ago when I used to work in another market. So that with that data, I was able to tell who I need to retarget. Things like that. You need to start talking to your data. The analytics is there. Data abounds. We just need to access the right data. And those of us who are in the industry, when we have our clients, we need to tell them, show the data to them, see how things are working. That's the way to get more budget to support what you want to do.
It'll be a good time to turn to the audience who also participate in this discussion. I will first start with the Chairman of the National Media Commission, a quick comment, and then also some other distinguished guests that I've seen here. Then I also give the audience the opportunity to ask questions. If I look at my time, I'm left with 15 minutes more, and I want to capture all these questions and contributions as it's live on all the various media platforms. So if you're as brief as possible, I'll be so grateful for that. So if you can get the chairman of NMC the microphone to look at what he has to say, just a quick comment, and then I'll take other comments as well, and I'll open it up for quick questions as well. Back to the guys on the stage here, and I get back to the audience, please. Do you think that, I get your submission, and I, as someone who is in this space, I'm worried. Is there future for traditional media?
I'd like you to think about it this way, right? So you're a company, take yourself like you're a corporate entity, and you decide to move into a new property, right? Because your business is expanding, but you're going to keep your old property until you've built the new one. So traditional media has to move into convergence, because it's a powerful tool if it's within the context of a converged environment. But the future is digital, and analog is dead. It's as simple as that.
Let me get to the chairman of the National Media Commission in playing their regulatory role. And having all these challenges been brought about, sitting at the top there, you see that the space is quite difficult or challenging?
There's nothing that people do that is not challenging. If you limit yourself only to the challenges, then you may not make progress. Because the more obstacles that you are able to cross, the greater depth that you make in terms of moving forward. Yeah, but Prof specifically made reference, and I think that I agree with Prof that in giving support, we must target it at maximizing the returns on the support that you give. It is not every support that you give that may yield the required results. And the greatest investment is about capacity building. Because a lot of the people who commit those errors that we speak about, sometimes they are not conscious of the fact that they are misleading people. Because they think that they are performing a responsibility, but for lack of appreciating what they are doing and the value that they have to generate by themselves, they commit themselves into some of the things. And so I will support any support that may come, whether from government or from corporate world, that is aimed at building the capacity of the human resources that are available in the media to achieve their work. Now, the other thing, you were asking a question about whether development communication will wash in the face of what we are doing. Most of the time, the problem is the packaging. Because if you are able to package it well and make it more interesting, because sometimes people are not just interested in things that will exercise them, they are equally interested in the things that will impact on their lives. And one of the things that we must stand up, and that is the problem, question about ethics and all that, is how valid or how true or how verifiable are some of the statements that people are putting across. And that is also why I agree with Mr. Abwedi that sometimes the kind of people that we bring to speak in itself is an attraction or distraction. Now, one of our biggest difficulties is the polarization of our environment. Where when you are speaking about an issue, people are not interested in what you are presenting, but the colors that you are wearing. And that is what will make people look at it. I live in Tamale, for some years. And there was this problem within the Muslim community there, between the Federal group and the traditional descent. And therefore, when people go to any event, they look at who is sitting at the head of the table. If they see that it's an Federal person who is leading, the other ones will go back. They are not willing to listen. If they come and they don't see, so then what you have to do is to make sure that when you want the people to come, put a Federal there and put the Orthodox also there. So when they come, they see that both of them are adequately represented, and therefore then they are willing. Because until people are willing to listen to you, they cannot garner anything out of you. And the first thing in moving forward is to attract people to devote the time even to listen. Because it is only after they have listened that they can determine whether it is worthwhile or it is not worthwhile. It tells us that the mode of communicating and the way that we package information might be such that it will appeal to the senses of people rather than to their emotions. That is one of the ways that we can move forward.
Thank you so much, the Chairman of the National Media Commission. If we can have about 3 questions or 4, and I hope we can scatter it across all the various interest groups here. So if you raise up your hands, I would call you to make a quick commentary or very quick question and have our guest here answer them. I can see a lady's hand behind there. If you first introduce yourself and where you're coming from, I'll be grateful, please.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Venus Taria. I'm director of Now Available Africa. It's a leading digital advertising agency in Ghana. I feel compelled almost to lend my voice to the conversation since there are no women present on the panel and I'm a lady in that space. I think sometimes it takes a catalyst to push people into a space, and I'm really happy to see that we're having a forum whereby you're using language that we've been championing for the past 8 years. Stephen can attest to that. And I'm happy to see that Ghana in particular embracing the opportunities that digital and tech offer us and are looking at how we can optimize that to improve and create solutions for ourselves. I strongly believe that in creating the change and behavioral change that we seek to see in our environment, it will take commitment. Behavior change doesn't happen overnight. And it really requires a strong partnerships between the media and us agencies. We're facilitators for you. I also ask that those who are championing and calling for change in our environments commit to really good budgets, because it requires a sustained effort over a long period of time to sensitize people, to let people hear, and to create behavior change that we want to see in our environment. I do have a question for the panel. As you can see, in this environment, we have optimized the presence of digital. People can log on to various social media platforms to engage in the conversation that we're having in a physical space. It poses a challenge to media houses because content now is instant. People have watched it and they no longer have to sit at home and wait till 8 o'clock to view the news. So my question to you would be, as media owners, what do you advise them to do? If you're a business and now your model has been changed so much, what systems can you have in place to allow you to optimize in your business? Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam. If I can have 3 more questions, and even his contribution, be as brief as possible so we can take more. I see a gentleman over there, his hand is up. Can you give us your name, where you're coming from, and go to your question?
All right, good morning. My name is Kwesi Eisen from Pacific Solutions and representing Advertising Association of Ghana. Mine is just a contribution, and I would like to add my voice to the aspect of data and then analytics that was presented earlier, or you spoke to that very well. Yes, I think one of the problems that we haven't seriously addressed is the issue of analytics, both digital world and then in the traditional world. And that is an area that would love us all as thought leadership platforms providers, we should tackle them seriously. Because over here, we even had 16% online penetration in West Africa. We also had 28% online penetration. But that is the descriptive aspect of it. Now, we haven't even looked at the diagnostic as to why it is so, and then build on to the prescriptions in terms of actions that we can take to address them, and then make predictions into the future, how it's going to happen. That's the traditional world. And when it comes to analytics, these things matter very much. When it comes to the digital world, web analytics, for instance, is very, very common. A lot of us use our websites, but we don't really derive maximum benefit from it in terms of the analytics. We don't even know where our audiences are coming from. We don't even know how we acquire them. We don't know how they behave when they come onto our sites. And then the conversion aspect of it, if in terms of sales or downloads or sign-ups are your objectives. So these are the areas I think moving forward we should be seriously be looking at. Thank you very much.
Any other? Bright, any question? Not just distinguished guest here, but we also have the information minister here. We have the chairman of the National Media Commission here as well. Bright, any quick question?
For a question, I would want us to ask ourselves, what will it take for the resurgence to happen from various perspectives? The ecosystem has been built over the last 50 years or so, from the mainframe computers through to the mobile phone now. A lot has been done. Data has been collected. The ecosystem has been organized. 20 years ago, if you went into London, you could do navigation around. 10 years, even more. In Ghana, today you can do navigation, and you can find any place. So the structural changes have been done. Now, the next thing is, how do we make sure that we prepare ourselves to take advantage of the structural reorganization that has been put in place for Africa to leapfrog? Those are my questions that I keep asking myself.
Mr. Bodi, I thought there was one question from the lady, and I just want you to pick that question quickly.
I think some media houses are doing that now. You go to some media houses now, there's a separate online editorial team that creates content, not off the back of what's going into traditional, but creating content on the go, things like that. We need to start looking at that because that's the reality. Okay, so the kind of regular operation is that online only publishes what is being put out on traditional. No, that's wrong. You need to have an arrangement where the online creates its own content in addition to complementing what's being created offline, because it's always on. And Venus and I have worked in this environment for many years. Digital is always on. The news is breaking and all of that. I'll give an example. What happened at the DRA? A lot of the content that your station used was filmed by some independent person standing in one corner and filming it. And the news was just always good. You couldn't delay the broadcast until 12 o'clock or 5:30 for Elvis to come on, Evans to come on. And so the online team needs to be pushing out that content regularly. It's a challenge, but we need to invest not only in infrastructure, also in capacity, and dovetail into what Bright asked. We need to have more conversations like this, where there's thought leadership, where a lot more people get equipped with the knowledge and understanding. And we need to invest also even in libraries in our media houses, where people will go to read white papers and things like that, because digital is, it's always on. Things are changing every day. You can't, same old, I mean, Honorable Kuju said, same old won't work in the post-COVID era.
I see. Let me go to Mr. Afomoni. Quick comment from him. President, how could I have forgotten our President Afomoni for just a quick comment whilst we try and draw the curtain down this program? Quick one.
Let me quickly sprinkle a stardust of commendation on graphic for this program and the aptness of the topic, which chimes with the World Bank report. And this report supports the correlation between well-researched, well-presented business and economic news and a country's economic upswing. So this reinforces the need for the Ghanaian media, the need for all key players to make a conscious effort to move the paradigm from the obsessive and compulsive politics which has enveloped this country to specialization, especially on business and financial journalism, since it holds the key to picking us up from this pickle caused by COVID-19. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Afomoni, for that very brief comment as you draw the curtain down. Let me go first to Mr. Chumesi as we wrap up. Your final thoughts as in the future of this space and how can we play our role in aiding the recovery of the economy?
I am very encouraged by the quality of discourse here. It just confirms for me, as a business person, that Ghana must be the digital hub for Africa. But what I'd like to say, in addition to that, is every context needs data, right? And here I'm talking about intellectual capital. There's a woman called Louise Bourgeois. She wrote a book, Mass Media in Africa. It was published early 90s. The problems she identified then are the same problems that we are faced with today. Another guy has written a paper which is accessible on the net. His name is Jim Cashel. It's broadband everywhere. The reality is that the underwater cables have been laid, about $10 billion around Africa. There's a ring. The reality is that I think even in Ghana, there's a ring around the country. What is missing, what is needed is the last mile. That 16% in West Africa, or 20% in Ghana, is going to shift to 60% within the next 3 years. When that shift happens, we better make sure that we are ready on content. Content number one. Where is that movie about Yasantua Wars? Where is that documentary about our great rivers and our kings? We haven't even scratched the surface of the billions of dollars of content publishing possibilities. Secondly, in terms of media evolution, the regulatory environment has changed. Right now, the platforms such as Facebook have become utility products, right? Like electricity, as per the internet, right? So the reality is that if they can't be regulated in the West, which they are not, because of the fast-moving pace of machine learning, we've got to find a way of creating our own digital ecosystem. We have to. That speaks to the African narrative. Try Googling a very simple thing like a beautiful lady on Google. You just see white woman. It is not true. Algorithms is a cultural efficacy. And when you look at the work Andela.com is doing in Ghana and Nigeria, they go around universities picking first-class students. A lot of the coding that happens in the West comes out of Ghana and Nigeria, believe it or not. They are brainy young kids here. Our population is basically under 30 years old. If we sensitize the reality of getting into the digital system, the economy will boom. The economy will boom.
Let me get to Prof. And there's always talk about this shall pass and there's light at the end of the tunnel. Can the same be said for the media? That when COVID is effectively managed, since they said that it won't go away, it'll be with us, will the media be excited or will be counting our losses?
The media have great opportunities, I think, all the time in Africa now. My colleagues and then the lady's question, I think, poses the issue of content. And with the digital transformation, the question of content for our media, particularly media like graphic, GBC, and even the other bigger media in our environment of a developing, growing democracy, the question of content must be looked at very critically. See, because the kind of content that is changing every second, every minute on social platform and so on are basically news and information. But for a society, all societies, whether advanced or growing like ours, the other content that are also very vital are the content that you will find in features, opinions, and also interactive activities like debates and so on and so forth, from which you generate ideas, from which debates on policy and so on come. Where do we place the production of such content on our digital platforms? I raise this question because there is a tendency for the kind of material that goes on social media to make people generally lazy about reading material that are longer than one line or whatever. And yet our media have the social responsibility of generating the kind of content that give thought, that promote some enlightenment in society, that promote debate, discussions, and so on. So the question of content, for our media to approach the production of such content for the public in the developing digital environment is something that managements, editors, and so on have to look at critically, so that whilst providing the news, the information that is changing all the time, there will also be room for producing the kind of content that really is the nerve center of society moving forward. The challenge for institutions like Graphic, GBC, and so on, Joy FM, whatever, is how do we sustain the traditional media and yet move into the future, into the digital world, which is the future, and especially considering the kind of environment we are in, because it is cost also. If, for instance, Graphic wants to be really national in terms of the expanse of coverage, it must not only be government, Accra, Kumasi, but the rural areas, what is going on? It requires, as Mr. Wedi said, investment in human resource. As Mr. Ayeboafo said, in training this human resource in all of the different regions, all of the different districts, so that there will be news that is national all the time, for Graphic to be truly representing a national media organization. And I say that for all of our major media houses.
Mr. Wedi, the final thoughts on the...
Once again, thank you very much, everyone. Couple of things. I think the way forward is for media houses and businesses to continue to understand, learn more about the consumers and the user habits and all those things. Number two, the tools are there. We need to embrace them, leverage them. And I like the word embrace, because often we create a phobia about technology. No, technology is there to enable growth. Let's embrace it. Let's hack technology and use it in the right ways. And finally, I think it's good to hear, and this is because our Honorable Minister is here, and I want to say this. It's good to hear we have interest from big companies like Twitter and the rest. What I would say is that we need to start asking the right questions. What kind of investment are they going to make in this market? How is that going to help us to tell our story? Because often when they go to some markets, what they do is that they just set up a call center. And that doesn't even bring any growth to us telling our story as African. We need to look at that, have the right conversations with these businesses as they look to come to Ghana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boedi. And talking about media support, it may not necessarily be just about money, but also technical support as well. I understand that from the Information Minister, next week the Ministry of Information is hosting a partners conference on providing support for media capacity enhancement. So follow the Ministry of Information website for more information, and also understand that you can join them as well for this whole capacity building program. I know that's something that would excite Professor Kakari on this whole thing about how we can support the media. So I'd like to say a big thank you to our panelists here, Mr. Joe Chumesi, CEO of ABN Holdings Limited, Mr. Stephen Boedi, Lead Enabler Digital Marketing and Communications Expert, and also Professor Kwame Kakari. He is board chairman of a Graphic Communications Group. And also to the audience, you can give a round of applause, being a wonderful audience here. Thank you so much. And also to graphic business as well, and Stanbic Bank. Wonderful to Stanbic Bank for believing in this when we talk about supporting the media. And also Mr. Affol as well, MD of Graphic Communications Group, also thinking that this thought leadership program has to go on. And all those industry experts who are here to join us for this whole discussion, I say thank you so much. And I believe the debate will still go on since COVID will be with us, and it's about how we manage it and how we survive the market and survive the turbulence. They said that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I believe that that is what we all believe in. They will say that also this may pass. Thank you very much. My name has been George Yafe, our show moderator for this program. Have a good morning, and let's still go ahead with the discussion even after we formally end this program. Thank you so much, and have a good morning.